Hey guys, Cobra DVS here, and it's been a while since I've done a video outside of the podcast, and hopefully you've been watching the podcast. It's been a lot of fun to do so far. We've had some cool guests. We had Tommy Tallarico, and then last week we had JP from JP Switchmania, and on the next episode, which probably will be just after this video, we're gonna have a good buddy of Hunter and mine. Sam from Survival Review, and yeah, so that'll be a fun episode. If you haven't checked it out, name of it's Infrequent Jog Podcast. It's kind of just a gaming podcast where we, talk about games and what have you. So if you're interested in, that kind of stuff, killing an hour, something going on in the background, should be fun. So, primarily when I started this channel, it was about collecting and about, pickups and things along those lines. And since I've kind of kicked stuff back off like a month or so ago, well, actually it's been quite a few months now, crazy how that flies, isn't it? But I haven't really done much in the way of collecting, so I did my room tour video. That was the first one I did when I came back. But I thought it'd be interesting to kind of see how, some of my collections nowadays, go over them, kind of give them a fresh look, because I haven't done this in a long time. I wanted to start with one of my favorite consoles to collect for, that's the Genesis. I had a Genesis growing up, and I would say I probably played more NES than I played Genesis, but we had them both, and then Super Nintendo I played more of that. But I've always had a soft spot for the Genesis, and I'm not really sure where that comes from, because I did not have really, the only game I remember having are Sonic 1, 2, Road Rash, and Altered Beast. And even that being the case, I still really love to collect for this thing. And there's a ton of games on here that are really good that everybody should check out. So I don't want to make the video too long, so I won't preface it much more than that. So the background, you'll notice there's a few things there. We'll just keep those as the background for the remainder of the video, but I wanted to show off a couple of things. This is the it's a boxed system set. And I think, and I'm not an expert on the Genesis, so forgive me if any of my facts are wrong, but I think this was the launch version. And it came with a copy of Altered Beast, and I believe it says high definition graphics on the back part of this ring where the cartridge would be, well, the cartridge is blocking it there, but would say high definition graphics. There's certain serial numbers that are, I cannot remember, I think it's the first few letters, maybe it's the last, might be the first few, that will tell you if it's one of the first models or not. And we'll get to that a little bit later with one of these EA games that I have. Anyway, this is probably my favorite version of the Genesis in the box. There was a time where I had every single Model 1 variant besides the Streets of Rage 2 one. And that's a really cool box too, but since I really love Altered Beast, and it's one of the, the few games I remember playing as a kid, this one has always been my favorite. And when I purged my collection a couple years ago, I kept this one, and I kept this one for a reason, because it's really cool. This one's complete-ish, as far as I know. I can't tell you exactly what's in there. Obviously all the controllers, the game is in, actually the game is out, it's out here. Power, RF, all that. I don't know if it has the manual or not. I guess I haven't opened it in quite a while. And I don't like to open it too much because those things get, the styrofoam can break inside and things like that, and I want to keep it in as good a shape as I can. And overall, it is in pretty good shape. You can tell it's old, a little dust on the top, but it is in good shape overall. Over on the other side, I actually do have one more Model 1 Genesis. It's the Sonic 1 bundle, kind of run-of-the-mill. It's not complete, and I didn't feel that I needed to bring that out, but I do have one of those too. Over here I've got the Power Arcade Stick, or the Arcade Power Stick, I guess. I can't remember where I got this, probably from a game store, but I don't use it. I don't use it very often. I actually have a loose one that if I were to use would be that one. But I don't really like to play games that much with an arcade stick. I can see how some games would lend themselves to playing with an arcade stick. Shooters, if you've got a turbo button, which it looks like this one's called Mega Fire, but I'm gonna go ahead and guess that's a turbo button. I can see how using it would make sense and be fun, but I generally I don't. I usually will use the controller, a 6-button controller most of the time. So I have that, and then one of my favorite things in my entire collection, let alone the Genesis set, is a CDX. Most of you will know, some of you may not, but a CDX is a combo Sega CD and Sega Genesis system into one unit, and it's about the size of a Sega Genesis game. So, a boxed game. So, just for comparison, here's that copy of Altered Beast. It's a little thicker than this, but it's about that big, right? So it's very small. It'll play audio CDs. You can even make it portable if you want to. You can't quite make it out in the picture, but down here are there's room for actually, you know what, it might be on the other side. But there's room for some AA batteries, and I forget how many it takes. I think it's 4. I don't believe you can run the console off that, just an audio CD, and I don't know why you'd want to. It would blast all of about 5 minutes if you tried to run the system on it. But this is a cool system. They're hard to find, but they're not that hard to find. I mean, if you look, they're always on eBay or whatever. And I've seen several in the wild. I was able to get. I found mine at a buddy of mine. Actually found it at a flea market, I think in Florida, which is hundreds of miles from where I live. It was for $1. Didn't know if it worked. Didn't really know anything about it. It did work, as it turned out. Now later on, I was able to track down this box from a buddy of mine, Minster, Michigan, who I've mentioned a few times here. So that is almost complete. It's missing a Sega CDX registration and the manual, but it does have all 3 of these CDs that it mentions here. Down here you can't quite see, but it's a Sonic CD, the Sega Classics Arcade Collection, and Echo the Dolphin. And that's that. Some of these, and in fact, I thought mine had it, and I guess it doesn't. But some of them will actually have a sticker on it, and I think they usually put it over here that says it doesn't work with the 32X console, or add-on, I should say. Which is actually not true. It does work with the 32X console. The issue... Oh, you know what? Actually, it's on the 32X box. I think the 32X box says in this general region that it doesn't work with the CDX. Actually, I do have a 32X, so let's go check that out. Alright, so I've got the 32X box here, and it does say it right down there in the corner. Compatible with all Genesis units except the Genesis CDX. Which of course is not true. It does work. The issue is that let's just look at it. The add-on itself, the picture on the box is it's sitting on a Model 2 Genesis. The add-on itself will be loose. It won't sit tight, flush with the console. You can see it here if you look closely. There's a seam right there. That is an attachment that allows the 32X to sit flush with the Model 2 Genesis. It will naturally sit flush with the Model 1, I believe. But they planned, this is what I had heard, and I can't remember where I heard this, but they had planned to release another sort of buffer attachment thing to make it fit flush with the 32 or the CDX console, because it's obviously a different shape than the Sega CD Model 1 or 2. And they never did release it. I can't imagine that this sold very many units. It's probably it was probably quite expensive when it came out. But the 32X will work with it. It'll just be a little bit loose when it's sitting in there. So I didn't want to focus on anything other than Genesis here. The 32X kind of fit into the story. So, but I'm not going to talk about any of the games I have for that or the Sega CD. Certainly not the Master System or any other console besides the Genesis. So let's go ahead and get started. I've got about, I don't know, 40 or 50 games. It's more of a quality versus quantity thing with me. I don't buy games I don't want to play anymore. So all of these games I either have played or will eventually play and want to have to play. So let's go ahead and start. 10 minutes into the video, goodness. Alright. First one, The Adventures of Batman and Robin. This one I got kind of recently. This is a really good game, and it's not all that common to find, moreover because it's one of the cardboard box games. So you can find it loose pretty easily, but finding a box version doesn't happen every day. This one is complete, in pretty decent shape. I got this on a bid on eBay, pretty good. It was less than like 30 bucks, I think. or maybe around 30, and that's a good price for this. This is a, I don't know if you'll be able to see it. Yeah, maybe. It's a side-scrolling beat-em-up. It really ties into the cartoon that, or the animated series, I should say. Well, maybe it's not the animated series. I'm trying to think what this ties into. You'll have to forgive me. I'm not really sure, but the art style in the game itself is actually really comic book-like, and it's super cool. A really good game. Probably the best Batman game on the system. Maybe. I know a lot of people like the Tim Burton Batman game. But this one's really good, and it's also very hard. But if you can find it for a good price, pick it up. Next is a classic, Altered Beast. There's not a whole lot you can say about Altered Beast, right? I mean, it's one of the quintessential Genesis games, and it's still one of my favorites. Let's see. This one's not my original copy. I don't have that one anymore. But this is a nice copy. Real common game, real cheap game, and but I still think it's one that everybody needs to have. It is just a classic game. Here's one that's a little underrated. Alien 3. This is a arena game. An arena is a subsidiary of Acclaim. Acclaim. So you'll find a lot of the time that there are games released on the Genesis with the arena title. There's a few of them. And then on the Super Nintendo, they'll either be released by another subsidiary or by like Acclaim themselves. So a good example would be, well, Alien 3 actually. On the Super Nintendo was an LJN game, which I believe is another. Am I getting that right? I think I am. I believe it's another LJN game. Mortal Kombat's a good one. Mortal Kombat, I believe, was an arena game on the Genesis, but obviously it's Acclaim on Super Nintendo. This is a run and gun. It's actually really good. It's for what it is. I mean, it's not a Contra Hardcore or anything like that, but it's for the type of game it is, based on the license, it is quite fun and not expensive. So if you are looking for a good maze-style shooter, 2D side-scrolling shooter, this one's good to play. Definitely recommended. So this is one that I haven't played, Animaniacs. This is, I bought, and I don't believe it's complete either. Oh, yes, it is. Oh, and it has registration. That's right. Okay, so I ended up buying 2 copies of this game by mistake. So I was at a Midwest Gaming Classic trying to find the Castlevania Bloodlines registration card, which just so happens to look an immense amount like this. But if you notice, and we'll try and do the fine print right below my thumb, it says the date Animaniacs was purchased, so obviously this one is for Animaniacs. So I ended up buying the game at like full-blown retail, which was only like I think $12. Thinking that I had gotten a Castlevania Bloodlines registration, and I didn't. I ended up getting an Animaniacs registration, which is fine. Still cool to have, but I have not played that game. And this is another common theme that we'll see throughout the whole thing. You can see right here, Konami's name is imprinted on the case. There are quite a few companies that do that, and I'll try and mention those as we go through it. Was Acclaim or Arena one of those? It may have been. Yeah, you'll see Arena, that Alien game has Acclaim imprinted right where the cartridge would go. So you'll see that on a lot of things, and for some people it doesn't matter, for some it does. It does for me on certain games, so we'll talk about that as they come up. Next one's a great game, Battletoads. You know, I actually prefer this one to the NES version, which is probably sacrilege, but to be honest with you, it's easier. Graphically, it's not that much of a step up from the NES one. It's probably more colorful, but it is easier. I was actually able to beat the Turbo Tunnel on this, but I never got really that much further. There is a variant of this that comes in a cardboard box. I'm going to open this one up. I wouldn't call that version super rare, but it's definitely highly uncommon. Not all that expensive yet, but eventually I'm sure things will trend in the expensive direction. Now, the cardboard one has a black and white manual, I'm pretty sure, and this cartridge will have the Genesis logo that's on the side of the cartridges, kind of like this. Kind of like this, it'll be on the cartridge. Yeah, just like this, actually. Just like Animaniacs was. But I think the artwork is a version of that artwork from the manual and the front cover. So that's a good game. It's a good version of the game. If you're, you know, a purist, I would probably say you should play the NES one, because that's the that's the original one that you want to play to beat that turbo tunnel and be able to gloat about it. But this one's actually pretty good too. Alright, where am I going to keep putting these? Let's put them over here. Next is Battletoads Double Dragon, and I found this game at Goodwill. It was like $4, and it's complete. I won't bother opening up all of these, but this one is complete, and to me, this is the second best version of this game. I think it's far better than the Super Nintendo one. I hated that version. I'm not sure what about it I couldn't get into, but I didn't like it at all. This version's very good, very playable, a lot of fun. I do prefer the NES version, and I'm not really sure why. I think it's probably just the art style sort of clicks with me, because when I think Battletoads, I typically, and Double Dragon for that matter, typically think of the NES. But this is a really good game, and not all that expensive. It's much cheaper than the Super Nintendo version, and I highly recommend it. So Castle of Illusions is the next one. I've watched a lot of Genesis videos, and this game was pretty... I don't know if pivotal is the word, but it was pretty important when it comes to the Genesis being a success. Disney didn't license their stuff out to a lot of people, and Sega developed this one in-house, and it really turned out good. It's a good platformer. It's not mind-blowing, but for the time it was quite good, and it's still enjoyable. And they did a remake a few years ago, which I've never played, but this version is really good. Plus, it's got that classic artwork, right? This is a lot, I don't want to say a lot darker, but it definitely has a darker tone than a lot of Genesis, or a lot of Mickey Mouse stuff typically would. Yeah, I can't really complain about this game too much. I don't really have any actual complaints about that game. That's a fun one. Well, this is probably a game I have zero complaints about, and that's Castlevania Bloodlines. This one I'll open. So this one, originally I remember playing it and thinking, generally underwhelming compared to Super Castlevania 4. But the truth of it is, it's actually, if you think about it like a true Castlevania 4, because it's so close to the NES ones, you tend to like it a lot more. And so I appreciate it way more now than I did before, because it plays just like Castlevania 1 and 3, I should say. And it is really good. There's a lot of great little like graphical tricks that they've done to sort of make this feel unique, and then also stand its own against Super Castlevania 4. So this game, unfortunately, has gotten pretty expensive. There are two versions of it, of course. There's the cardboard box version, the Majesco version, which you can get. Again, this is another one with the, I won't open it up again, but a Konami case. And this is a case where I would want that Konami case to be with the game. So, and again, no registration card there because I accidentally bought it thinking it was, but it was the Animaniacs one. And then the last game from this first stack, Contra Hardcore. I usually think of those two games together at the same time, Contra and Castlevania, because they're, two of the few unique Genesis games from Konami. The other one being Hyperstone Heist, the Ninja Turtles, which is a kind of a muddled version of Turtles in Time, but still very good. I'm not going to open this one up, but this one's complete as well, and I've had both of these games a long time before they climbed up in value. This one's fun. This one is very fun, and it's difficult. It is difficult. I think it's the Japanese version that will allow you to have, or that gives you lives instead of one-hit deaths. So maybe I'll try that one or something, but I've never been able to get too far into this one, but then again, I haven't really played it a ton, but it is good. Alright, and so if you haven't figured it out yet, these games are in alphabetical order. So that's the way it's I'm just gonna keep going in alphabetical order, so yeah, let's move on. We were in the C's, so I've moved on to Stack 2. Now this is by far the rarest Genesis game I have. It would be one of the rarest games I have at all. And it's a new edition. It's a copy of Crusader of Centi. This one's in a box protector, as a few of them are. This one I got from a buddy. He was able to pick it up from, actually Derek from, Hunter from, we do the podcast together. And he gave me a good deal on this. Still expensive, obviously, and actually the cartridge is not in here because it's in my Genesis. I've been playing it. And I'm not going to open this one up because I'll probably wind up damaging it somehow by not paying attention. Really a great condition copy. This is a slipcover game, so the outer slipcover goes over one of the standard red Genesis cases, or one of the Genesis cardboard inserts. The manual is in color. It's a colored manual, which is not all that common for one of these slipcover games. But the reason I wanted this game, I wanted to play it, is because I'm a big Zelda fan. Link to the Past was the first one that I had beaten, and people always compare the two, this and that, the Genesis version of Link to the Past. So I thought it was worth a go, and I planned on doing a review of it, and I still may, but I'm in the middle of playing it, so I don't want to, you know, say too much about the game that I might say in the video. So anyway, we'll move on from that one. Alright, so we're out of the C's, moving into the D's. Death Duels, the next one. You know, I bought this a long time ago, and I guess the only reason I can really give you for why I bought it is I just thought it seemed so absurd and cool and like late 80s, early 90s, that I really wanted to play. I mean, look at that cover art. That is some of the best on the system, in my mind. I thought this was really cool. So this is, gosh, it's been a long time since I've played this, but this you are playing, it's monster versus monster, and you play in the first person. So you're running around and you're trying to destroy the other monster from the first person perspective. And is it good? Probably average, I would say. It's very unique and gory for the time, I guess. Oh, look at that. Not suitable for children under 13. It says there. So, but the cover art alone was enough to sell me. It says that there's a free strategy guide enclosed, and I'm wondering if they are just talking about. They're probably just talking about the manual. Yeah, so that's okay. But still a pretty cool game, and not expensive. But that cover art I think is worth the price of admission. The next one's a really classic game. This is Dr. Robotniks Mean Bean Machine, basically a version of Puyo Puyo, and it's really good. Not expensive, and worth checking out. So, and if you don't know what Puyo Puyo is, it's one of those match 3 type games. It's really good. It's like, just check it out. This is one that I haven't played, Double Dribble. And to be honest with you, the only reason I bought it is because it had a Konami case, which maybe you can see. Yeah, right below the cartridge there it says Konami. And it had a hang tab, and it's a good condition case. But I tell you what, I bought this for, I can't remember which game I was going to replace it with. But I decided not to, and the reason is because it was a Blockbuster game, and Blockbuster sticker is here on the front, still, and then even on the back. And the back, actually, it says Double Dribble. See if that'll focus there. Maybe it won't. But that sticker is a Blockbuster sticker, and I didn't want to take that off, so I wound up just buying this. And I hear this is not a good game. I haven't played it, and I don't really intend to play it. But it was a Konami game, and the case was in good shape, so I figured it was pretty good. This one is terrible cover art, Dynamite Duke, but this game's actually pretty good. If you can think of it's like a third-person arcade shooter, so something akin to Cabal, or what would be another one? What's that? Nam 1975, that Neo Geo game. This is kind of what that's like. The one thing about this game, though, is when you get up close, when somebody gets up close to you, you can melee combat them. So it's pretty fun. I love these early Genesis boxes, the black box ones, we'll call them, the grid style. They have these grids on the outside. This is really bad cover. As good as Death Duel was, this one is probably as bad. But the game is probably more fun. So that one has a Master System port, too, which would be interesting. Alright, speaking of grid games, EastWest. So, this game is on, like, every Genesis collection ever, but actual people who talk about the Genesis usually don't mention it that much. Except I was watching and I've mentioned this guy on my channel a few times. Sega Lord X is his name. Huge Sega guy. He loves EastWest, always talks about it. I had never really played it, so I found it at Midwest Gaming Classic, picked it up, and it is quite good. You know, I'm not going to open this one. It's not like a collector's, you know, game. It's just, it's not that expensive or anything. But this is a really good shaped copy of it. And it has, again, that classic grid box type look that I really, really like. Ah, here's one I haven't played, and it's one of the few, in fact, it might be the only Sega Genesis game I have that's not complete. Can't remember, but this one is missing a manual. And this one does not have a 10-gen case, and I cannot remember offhand if 10-gen had their own Genesis case. I guess I'll see when I get to the Miss PacMan. But I don't know. I've never played Gauntlet 4. I don't know anything about it, and but eventually I will play it. Oh, it does support the 4-player adapter, which of course they advertise 4 players on the front, but you can see it supports the 4-way play on the back, so that would be interesting. But that one I haven't played, and I should, because Gauntlet's a pretty good game. Hey, here's another game I picked up at the Midwest Gaming Classic, Ghouls and Ghosts. This game's really good, and I think it's probably my favorite in the series. And by that I mean, you know, the Genesis version, the NES game, the Ghosts and Goblins, Super Ghouls and Ghosts. This is the one that I usually will come back to, and I think it's because it plays the best that I've played. Now, I haven't played the Super Graphics version or anything like that, but it runs smooth, has really good music, good controls, and this one was developed, actually, I'm pretty sure this is correct, it's a Capcom game, but this version was developed in-house at Sega, and that could be why it's so good. But this game it's kind of in that middle of the road as far as price goes. It's like a $40 to, I don't know, $60 or $70 game, probably, depending on condition. But it's worth it. Really a fun game. Great to play around Halloween, too. Speaking of Halloween, Ghostbusters. Boy, it's been a long time since I've played this one, but generally this is considered one of the best Ghostbusters games, especially compared to the NES ones. And I haven't played it in... I gotta change arms. My arm's getting tired. I haven't played it in a long time, and but it's a good side-scrolling shooter type game. This one was always on the more expensive side back when I was collecting for Genesis. At the time, it was on the expensive side. I'm not sure really where we're at now on this game, but it's still a fun game to play, so worth it either way. So this is a game that I think most Genesis collectors put in like that upper echelon of games, not from a collectability standpoint, even though it's there too, but from a like gameplay and graphical standpoint. This game is really, really impressive. One of the early Treasure games. I don't think it's their first game. I think their first game was that McDonald's game, Treasure Island or Treasure Land, I think it's called. But anyway, this is like a, we'll just call it a Contra type game. Really, really good. Gunstar Heroes. This one is complete. And I've had this one a long time. And gosh, I can't remember how much I paid for it, but I remember it being a really good deal. Because partially, you can see the artwork at the crease here. That is a rip in the artwork. But to be honest with you, it didn't bother me. And it still doesn't bother me. It never even crosses my mind, because you can't really see it. It looks like just normal wear, and I don't mind that. So that's a good one, and you know, I don't know what the price is at nowadays, but it's still definitely worth playing. All right, moving on to the next stack. We are now in the M's, M as in Mercs. So this was one that I wanted to get. I really liked the box and the art style. Again, those grid-like boxes that I'm always a fan of. But this one, additionally, is also a pretty good game. It's basically a sequel to Commando. In fact, I think in the arcade, this is a Capcom game as well. I think in the arcade, that's how it's advertised. Or maybe not. Yeah, I think... I shouldn't say in the arcade. I think in general it's advertised as like a sequel to Commando. And they play They play extremely similar. Top-down shooter, and pretty good. Pretty good. Now, this one doesn't have a Capcom case, but of course, this is probably before they were doing that, because there are Capcom Genesis cases, and I'm sure we'll come across one. So earlier I mentioned when I had Gauntlet that it didn't have a 10-gen case. So here's Miss PacMan, which is... Oh man, this has got to be in the top 5 most common Sega Genesis games. I mean, you can walk into 5 Goodwills and probably find 3 copies of this game. And it's actually a really good version of Miss Pac-Man. There's a lot of different maze types that you can play, as well as obviously the classic game. It doesn't, as far as I remember, play the full screen on the game, or the full board on the screen. In fact, here's confirmation. That's about 2/3 of the board. So it does scroll, but, you know, to be honest with you, that never really bothered me. That's a good version. And let's check behind the cartridge. And it does not say 10-gen, so, you know, that doesn't rule out that there are 10-gen cases, but both of my games don't have them. I guess Awesome Possum's a 10-gen game, and then Grindstormer, I think, is a 10-gen game, and Dragon's Fury, I think that's called. There's a handful of other ones out there, but those are the only ones I have. Alright, moving on. Predator 2. This is a Genesis exclusive. This is one of those games, well, kind of. This is one of those games that never came out on Super Nintendo, which is weird because Alien 3 did. And to be honest with you, I would say this is as good as Alien 3. This is a top-down shooter, kind of like... I don't want to call it like Smash TV because you're not locked into a single room like in that game, but maybe like Mercs would be a better example. Kind of a mix between the two. And you're taking down thieves, drug dealers, and you play as Danny Glover's character. And throughout the game, the Predator's you know, reticles of his shoulder cannon will show up on screen, and you've got to avoid those. This is actually pretty good, and I called it an exclusive because this game is not on Super Nintendo. There's a version of it for the Master System. It's on Game Gear. I think there's even a version for the Commodore 64, but I don't know how similar they all are. But this one is kind of a sleeper in that it does not get talked about a lot at all. But from a price perspective, it's a little, you know, kind of creeping up a little bit. Unfortunately, my artwork has a little bit of water damage, which you can see on the... you can kind of see some ripples in certain light. There, you can kind of see it there. Not bad, but eventually I'd like to replace that case. But anyway, that's a fun game to play. Here's another one that's a fun game to play. One of the more unique shooters on the system, and one of the few I've got. Helios, another one with a water damage label. You see the ripples here. And that's unfortunate because this is a good game and a good one to have in the collection. Everything inside is really good. But think of this as like a... ancient Greece shooter, right? I mean, you're flying on... I think Helios is the name of the horse, if I'm remembering that correctly. A Namco game, and really fun. And Namco just so happens to be a company with its own case. But of course, let me move my arm there. This one doesn't have it. So this one does not have its original case, apparently. Either that or it came out... What year did this come out? 1988? Is that right? Goodness. So maybe that's before they were doing custom cases. Not sure. Alright, so moving on. We are out of the P's into the R's. Rocket Knight Adventure. Probably the... gosh, if you're going to pick a platformer on this system and it's not Sonic, it's either going to be Castle of Illusion or this. And honestly, I would pick this one. This is an excellent game. Sparkster is the possum's name, and that's what he is. He's a possum. But I don't even want to try to explain it. You should play it. It's a really good platform. Pretty difficult. Lots of bosses. You kind of... The gimmick here is that you can charge yourself up and sort of rocket into different directions, and that helps you traverse and also kill enemies. This one... again, this one should have a Konami case. Does not have a Konami case. This one's just a regular Genesis case. This game has a sequel, which I do not have. anymore, but it's called Sparkster. And there's two versions of Sparkster. There's one on the Genesis and one on the Super Nintendo. And I think generally people will say, and I would probably agree, that they're not as good as Rocket Knight Adventures, but that Sparkster on Super Nintendo was probably a little bit more fun than the one on Genesis. Road Rash is one of my favorite games on this system, without a doubt. It is such a great game. I will never forget the music, the sound effects, everything about this game is really just classic Genesis. It's a motorcycle combat game. You can see this manual has seen better days. Somebody really liked to put all their stuff in there. But, you know, and I forgot this was all in here, but I got some cool, you know, the registration, things like that. A little poster in there. But this is one of the, if you had to pick, you know, the Desert Island games, they call them. If we were sticking to Genesis and we had to pick, we'll say 5, this would be on there. Really great. And a lot of people will say that the second one, and I've heard a few people say the third one, although not that many, is the best. For me, it's always been the first one. It's the first one I played, and it's got that music, that metallic sounding music. Is really good. Really good. Next is a great game, and you probably wouldn't expect it. Robocop versus Terminator. This is an excellent game. Boy, this was released on pretty much everything under the sun except NES, and the NES actually had a version at one point that I believe was canceled. And here's my copy in really good shape. This is a Virgin game, and I don't think Virgin has their own cases, so I don't think I need to look for that here. But this is a really good game. You play as Robocop, and you're going around, side-scrolling shooter, slower paced type game, but really good. Much better than any Terminator or Robocop game on the system. And in fact, it's better than both of those games on most systems. I would hold this up there pretty close with Terminator on Sega CD, which is one of my favorite games ever. I'd probably put this right behind it just because I love that soundtrack so much on the Sega CD Terminator. But other than that, and you know, I don't know what this game's going for now, value-wise, but it's worth playing. Definitely, no doubt about it. Alright, the next one, Shinobi, or Shadow Dancer, The Secret of Shinobi. This I think was this the second Shinobi game? I'm not an expert, and you'll have to excuse me, but it's this, Revenge of Shinobi, and then of course Shinobi 3 on the Genesis. This is a cool game, and I don't have the other ones, and I picked this one because I thought it was a really cool mechanic. You have a dog with you, and you can use that dog to attack enemies, and either, I don't know if they cause damage or if it will just sort of stun the enemy or distract them so that you can then move in and take them out. I thought that was a really cool mechanic for a game this early. So Shadow Dancer, that's a good one. All the Shinobi games have a value to them, and they're all pretty much the same in terms of price, but they're all really, really good games on Genesis. And the last one from this stack, Soldiers of Fortune. Yeah, I've had this game quite a while too. This is pretty much just like Mercs. Not anything super crazy, but it is fun. I kept this one when I purged my collection a while back, and I don't regret it. This one's also on Super Nintendo. I've never played that one, but this is a good game. Alright, we are now in the fourth stack, and there are about 15 games or so left. We are in the S's, which is not new for this stack, but we're just continuing on with the S's. Sonic and Knuckles. You know, this is one of the games that if you have a Genesis collection, you should have. Really an interesting story between this game and Sonic 3. Obviously, as most of you know, I'll just take it out, make it easier to explain. This is the second half of Sonic 3, basically, and in order to get that full Sonic 3 experience, you would plug Sonic 3 in to the top of Sonic and Knuckles cartridge, and it would allow you to play both games as they were originally intended. And I think that's really cool, and I think what's also even probably just as cool is how they've incorporated games like Sonic 2 and Sonic 1 into that lock-on tech. And I think at one point they were planning on doing something for every Genesis game, so well, I could be not remembering this correctly, but I think if you plug any Genesis game into the lock-on, it will play. I don't think I'm remembering that correctly. I was gonna say it will play Blue Sphere, which is that bonus game from Sonic. Is it this one? The one where you're running around the globe collecting those blue spheres? I think it might be Sonic 3 that has that, but if you plug Sonic 1 into this, it definitely plays Blue Sphere. If you plug Sonic 2 into this, it'll allow you to play as Knuckles in Sonic 2, which is really cool. And then, obviously, if you play Sonic 3, plug it into here, you can play Sonic 3 and Knuckles as it was originally intended. And then, of course, you can just play Sonic and Knuckles on its own if that's what you want to do. But that's a really interesting game, really cool. The game itself is probably I'd say my third favorite on the system. I might prefer it to Sonic 3, which is kind of weird to say because it's just like they're supposed to be their own, the same game. But I do enjoy playing as Knuckles, so I don't know. Next one is Sonic 3D Blast. This game feels just like such a lame game all the way around. The game itself is not that fun. The the case that it comes in is super cheap. The manual is black and white. The cartridge, obviously, there's nothing too special about the cartridge. But everything about this just feels kind of like a late in the life sort of cash-in type, and I know that's probably not true. But even that cover art is bad. I don't know. The game's just it's okay. I guess if you're gonna play a version, you'd want to play it on the Saturn. But they're basically the same game. That one just looks a little bit better. All right, so now we're getting into the classics, and I'll just bring all three of them out. And of course, they're not going to be. Here, I'll just hold them like this. Or maybe it would look better if I did it this way. Yeah, so it's the classic Sonic trilogy, and really you would want to include Knuckles in this, wouldn't you? Because that's sort of the follow-up to Sonic 3. But if you have a Genesis, you should have these three games. These are the staples, really, right? Most people, I would say in general, will say that Sonic 2 is their favorite. For me, it's always been Sonic 1. And that's the one I played the most growing up. It's the one I still play the most of. I have the best memories of Sonic 1. The music's really great. Not to discredit the music in any of the other games, obviously, but it's the one I remember the most. And I think one of the things I prefer about it the most, which a lot of people will say that they don't like about it, is that it's a little more methodical. It's not as fast. So you start playing some later Sonic games, and some levels feel like, not like they play themselves, but there are certain sections where you really just don't have to do anything. Sonic 1 is really a platformer from beginning to end. It still has it has the loops and what have you, but I always thought it played more like a true platformer, and it wasn't just about doing cool tricks. Now, of course, Sonic 2 and 3 are also great, but this one has always kind of stuck out as my favorite. And Sonic Mania, obviously the new one, also really good. Here's an interesting note, by the way. I mean, if you play this game now, you'll notice it does not have the spin dash, which is where you hold the down button and the jump button. You'll do the spin, the wind up and spin. It's probably shown on here somewhere. Maybe it's not, but you know what I'm talking about. It's a pretty famous Sonic move. It allows you to pretty much gain speed immediately. But later releases of this game, if you buy it like on the Switch eShop now, will have incorporated that spin dash into the game, which is fine. But to me, it ruins a little bit of the classic feeling that makes the first one feel a lot more unique. And plus, since it's so much more of a methodical type, slower platformer in a lot of spaces, it just doesn't make sense sometimes. Alright, here's another one that's in one of those really cheap boxes, like Sonic 3D Blast, Sonic Spinball. This game's okay. It's got some interesting music. You'll either like it or hate it. But I think this game's alright. I actually like it kind of a fair amount. There's another version of this in the regular clamshell case. That's the one I would recommend. Alright, so these next two games are two that I'll probably hang on to forever. I mean, when you're talking not only collectability, but cool factor, these two are probably the highest on the list, and I'll just show them together. And that's Splatterhouse 2 and 3. And let me see if I can just make a little tray for them to stand on. Of course, it's not going to work like I want it to, is it? Nope. So anyway, these are two really great games. Well, I guess I shouldn't say great. They're really good. They're not masterpieces by any means, but if you're a horror fan, they're really fun. They're super gory. They're over the top. Everything about them is just unnecessary, but they're really fun. They're really fun to play. And these are exclusives as far as I know. I'm not obviously an expert or anything, but I think these are exclusive to the Genesis, and obviously the first one was on the TurboGrafx 16. But these two are here, and you can also get them on the Splatterhouse remake for the Xbox 360, but you have to unlock them, I think. But these games have routinely held their value, and they've kind of been on the I'll open this one. They're kind of the pricier side since the beginning when I was collecting years ago. Now I don't remember I don't know what they're worth now, and I certainly don't remember what I paid for them back then. But these are games that people will typically try to get their hands on, and for good reason. They are really cool. So here's a version of an example of a Namco case. You can see the Namco label ingrained in there. Now both of these games have the Namco case. And that's pretty cool. These are ones where I would most definitely want that, so it's cool that they do. And if you don't know anything about these games, they're horror-themed games. You play as oh, what's this guy's name? Is it Rick? Yes, it's Rick. You play as Rick. He dons the well, in this one it does not look like Friday the 13th. In this one it doesn't really either. But in the game, it actually does look quite a bit like Jason's mask from Friday the 13th. And you go around, and in number 3, you're trying to rescue your girlfriend. In number 2, you're also trying to... Oh, excuse me. Of course I'm going to break some. You're also trying to rescue your girlfriend, Jennifer. 3 is different, because 3 is more on like a Streets of Rage type 3D plane. You know how beat-em-ups are in that sort of pseudo 3D. 2 is a straight-up side-scrolling platformer, or side-scrolling action beat-em-up type game. So they're different. They're not. They are unique from one another, but they're both cool in their own right. I guess if I had to pick one, I don't know. I kind of like the cheesiness of number 2, but they're both good. All right. So that's actually the second to last list, and I'll just move these over. And we can wrap it up. We've got about 6 or 7 games left here. Street Fighter 2, an obvious classic game, one that you need to have. So this one doesn't have a Capcom case. Now maybe they don't do Capcom cases. Maybe I'm just remembering that incorrectly. I swear that they did, but none of mine have it. This is a pretty good version of the game. It's Street Fighter 2. It's a classic. There was only 2 versions of Street Fighter 2 on the Genesis. This one and Super Street Fighter. I don't have that one, but this is a classic game. I don't have any. That's all the S's. I don't have the Streets of Rage games anymore. I used to have all 3. I got rid of them. They're beat 'em ups, and yeah, they're classics for sure, no doubt about it. And eventually, I'll probably re-get them. But I don't have. I don't play a ton of beat 'em ups, so I'm not that anxious to get them. But I'll wait for a good deal and eventually get them. Tommy Lasorda Baseball. This is one I can't even remember why I even have this on the shelf. To be honest with you, it's taking up a little bit of space. Not in good shape. Probably a fine game, but it's a sports baseball game, not really my cup of tea. Here is one that's one of my favorites, and I don't like a lot of shooters. I should say I don't like a lot of shooters. I don't play a lot of shooters, but Truxton is one of my favorite. I would put Truxton, Helios, and probably Android Assault on Sega CD as some of my favorites. This one, and I'm not sure why I liked this one so much, maybe because I was able to get a little bit further in this one than I am in most shooters. So that's probably not saying much to the quality of the game, even though I think it is heralded as a pretty good game. But I'm generally not that great at shooters. But this one gave me a chance, and this is a Sega game, so I don't think there would be obviously not a unique case here. But what great cover art on the front there, and one of those classic red box ones. This is a game that's kind of value-wise has gone up over the years too. And cool story on this. One day I was just cruising Amazon, probably 10 years ago, and somebody was selling it for $4. And of course, Amazon's not that good for like used video game stuff because either they won't put in a description or it's some sort of a stock description. But somebody had it for $4, and it was cartridge and case only, and I bought it immediately. And I was able to get a manual later on down the road from, I believe, Hunter. So I have a complete copy now, and I'll be hanging on to that one for sure. So this one is actually... This game came out in 2018, and I just got it the other day. It just came in the mail. I have not showed it on any video, so we'll show it here. Zeno Crisis. This is straight up a Smash TV type game, except you're going in through like aliens and things like that instead of I don't know, robots or whatever the hell you're shooting in Smash TV. I haven't played it yet. Cannot comment on how good it was or is. But I've heard good things. The only thing I've heard that you need to be, on the lookout for or aware of is that it's a twin stick shooter, and you're using it. You're using a Genesis controller to play it. And actually, I'll just show this now. What you'll be using for, obviously, you'll be using this for the left side, but you have to use these face buttons for controlling the right side, which can be interesting. I guess. Again, I haven't played it, but I'm gonna play it actually after this video. I'm gonna pop that one in. So you remember earlier, way back like an hour ago, when this video started, I was talking about the serial number on Genesis consoles. Now I'm not one to talk about games that are early low serial number consoles like NES. If you have a low serial number for an NES console that makes it worth more or whatever. That does not appeal to me. I don't care. It's cool to some degree, but it doesn't really, it's not going to weigh my decision one way or the other. But in terms of the Genesis, there is a good reason why you would want a low or a special serial number, and I for the life of me, I cannot remember what the what you should be looking for. It has something to do with, I think it's the letter B, or maybe it's an 8. I cannot remember, but on the bottom of the system you'll see it, and a quick Google search will tell you exactly what I'm talking about. But here's Zany Golf, or Zany Golf, I should say, and it's a miniature golf game for the Genesis from EA. And the reason why the serial number is relevant is because for some reason only really early model Genesis games will actually, or Genesis consoles will actually play this. So I've had other consoles that are Model 1s, but not the lower number with the specific digit that you're looking for that would tell you it will work, and the game won't work. So I guess you could try it on a Model 2, and I think I tried it on my CDX as well, and it would not work. Now the game itself I've not really played, but it's not the most common game, but it's not all that hard to find. It's just kind of a unique game. It's a miniature golf game. Not sure if I said that, but it's kind of cool to have. And it has an interesting tidbit about the the serial number. Alright, 2 games left. Zero Tolerance is the second to last one. This is an interesting game for a few reasons. Obviously, the case is a little bit different. If you look at other Genesis cases with that red bar, you'll notice this one's a lot thinner. It's an Accolade game. Accolade does have their own case, and you'll see that it's required because the cartridge is about twice the size as a normal one. Zero Tolerance is a first-person shooter, and in fact, as far as I can tell or remember offhand, it's probably the only one on the system. There's a Duke Nukem 3D Brazilian release. I guess that Death Duel was in first person, but what you think of as a first-person shooter, this is basically the only one, at least that's coming to mind. And it's actually pretty good. It runs decent. And it has a registration and some of that stuff in here, so that's really cool stuff. The game itself, yeah, it's not bad. It's not, Doom or anything, but it's pretty good for what it is. And I would actually say, compared to something like Doom on Super Nintendo, it's probably more enjoyable. That's just because that's such a bad version of an excellent game that this is just a fine version of a decent game. Plus you don't see this very often. yeah, so that's a cool game there. And one game left, and it's nothing really that exciting. A game called Zoom. Another decent little black box grid style case, and this is a puzzle type game, kind of like I don't know if you want to call it like Cubert. It's kind of like a version of Cubert. You have to like jump on these cells to change their colors, and you know, I think you have to jump on them all to clear the board or something, which is basically Cubert, right? But it's a little bit different from the way the stages are laid out and stuff. But it's a fine game, not all that expensive. It's pretty fun if you find a copy. And you know, that is it. That's the end of the video. I don't have a ton of Genesis games. I have a good amount. I think, like I said at the beginning, it's kind of a quality versus quantity thing. I'm not really going for a huge collection at this point. I'm just going for games that are fun, or games that I want to have in the set. You know, things like Sonic. Definitely, you've got to have Sonic, and then games like Bloodlines or Splatterhouse, which are cool games, you know, for their own reasons. I'll just wrap the video up by saying, if you're getting into collecting, I think the Genesis is probably one of the best places to start. It's either going to be like NES cartridges, or the Genesis would be, I think, good starting points. And the reason I say that is because not only are Genesis games pretty easy to find, but most of the time, at least I would say probably 67% of the time, so 2/3 of the time, you'll find Genesis games in their case. Now, maybe they don't have the manual or whatever, but compared to something like an NES game, where about, I don't know, 5% of the time you find them boxed in the wild, the odds are much more in your favor to find them complete, or at least, like I said, boxed. So it's really good, and it's a really good place to start. And the games in general are not that expensive compared to things like Super Nintendo. So, you know, because those games are so hard to find in the box in good condition because they're cardboard, the Genesis is relatively much more affordable. And there's a lot of cool arcade games and unique games on the Genesis. So I think it's a really cool place to start, and one of my favorites to collect for. So that was an hour-long video, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. A lot to talk about. I hope the quality turned out okay. I'm kind of doing a little makeshift, you know, kind of set here, we'll call it. So anyway, that's the end of the video, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks.